welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going deep into software development and really exploring how all those apps and systems we use every day actually get built.
It's quite a journey.
Whether you are prepping for a meeting, brushing up on industry trends, or just playing curious about how the magic happens, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
So we're going to give you a solid understanding of the software development lifecycle, and then we're going to explore how things like DevOps, site reliability engineering, or SRE, and platform engineering all work together to shape what it's actually like to be a developer these days.
It's a really dynamic ecosystem, and understanding the core concepts here can unlock a whole new level of understanding about the tech world.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the software development lifecycle.
Yeah.
So it's more than just writing code, right?
Right. It's a structured process, kind of with these distinct phases like planning, designing, building, testing, deploying, and even maintaining.
Oh, okay.
Think of it kind of like building a skyscraper. You wouldn't just start stacking bricks without a blueprint or a solid foundation. Right. You need a plan for the plumbing and the electrical systems and all that.
Of course.
And similarly, software development needs careful planning, design, and a well-defined process to ensure the final product is, functional, reliable, and actually meets the needs of the people who are going to use it.
Okay, that makes sense. But things have changed a lot in the software world, right? I remember hearing about this thing called waterfall development, where each phase was kind of done in isolation.
Yeah, the waterfall model definitely had its limitations. It was like passing a baton in a relay race. Each team had to wait for the previous one to finish before they could even start.
Oh, I see.
And this led to really lengthy development cycles, limited feedback, and a higher risk of discovering problems really late in the game. And when you find them late in the game, they're a lot more expensive and time-consuming to fix.
Right, that makes sense. So the industry kind of realized that this wasn't working and started looking for a better way.
Exactly. So then came this whole world of agile development, which really emphasizes flexibility, collaboration, and making progress in these small iterations.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a team of chefs all working together on a complex dish. They're constantly tasting and adjusting, refining the recipe as they go.
Oh, okay.
Agile is all about embracing change, getting feedback early and often, and delivering value incrementally, little by little.
Okay, I like that analogy. It definitely feels a lot more dynamic and responsive to real-world needs. But even with Agile, there can still be these points of friction, especially between the development team and the operations team, right?
Absolutely. And that's where DevOps comes in. It really tries to bridge the gap between these two teams that have traditionally been very siloed. And it's not just about tools and automation. It's a cultural shift that promotes collaboration, shared responsibility, and this real focus on continuous improvement.
So DevOps is like the secret sauce that brings development and operations together, making sure things are really smoothly and everyone's working together, right?
Yeah, precisely. And one of the key tools in the DevOps world is the CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, and continuous delivery.
CI/CD.
Yeah, and this is basically an automated workflow that helps streamline the whole process of building, testing, and deploying code changes. It's like having this well-oiled machine that takes care of all the tedious and repetitive tasks so the developers can focus on, developing, writing code.
That makes sense. Okay, let's unpack CI/CD a little bit more. What are some of the benefits, the real-world benefits of using these pipelines?
Imagine you're part of a team working on a large software project. In a traditional setup, you might spend days or even weeks just trying to integrate your code changes with everyone else's code, then more time running tests, and then finally waiting for the operations team to actually deploy those updates. It's really slow and error-prone.
Yeah, it just sounds very frustrating, not to mention the potential for delays and conflicts between teams.
Exactly. With the CI/CD pipeline, though, a lot of those pain points are just gone. They're significantly reduced. Every time a developer makes a change, that pipeline automatically kicks in, integrates the code, runs all the tests, and even deploys those changes to, say, a staging environment where you can do further testing and validation. And this allows for rapid feedback, early detection of any bugs, and just a much faster and more reliable release cycle.
Wow, so CI/CD pipelines are more than just about automation. They're really about fostering a culture of quality and continuous improvement.
That's a great point. By automating those tedious tasks and getting that feedback loop going, it frees up developers to focus on writing better code and addressing any issues that come up really quickly.
Okay.
Plus, having that transparency and increased collaboration between the developers and the operations people leads to a more efficient and harmonious workflow.
This all sounds fantastic for the developers and the overall software development process. But what about making sure the software is reliable once it's actually out in the world being used?
Well, that's where site reliability engineering comes in, SRE. It's all about building and maintaining highly reliable and scalable systems.
So SRE is all about making sure that those apps and services we rely on every day actually stay up and running, even when things go wrong.
Exactly. SRE engineers, they apply these software engineering principles to operations. So they're using automation, monitoring, data analysis, all to ensure that systems are resilient and can handle those unexpected events. And they work closely with the development teams to bake reliability into the software right from the beginning, rather than trying to tack it on as an afterthought.
That's a great point. It's kind of like building a bridge. You wouldn't wait for it to collapse before you address any structural weaknesses.
Yeah.
You'd engineer it for stability and resilience right from the start.
Yeah.
So how does SRE actually work in practice? What kind of tools and techniques do they use?
One of the key concepts in SRE is the use of service level objectives, or SLOs. These are measurable targets for things like system availability, latency, and error rates. They're like guardrails that define what good actually looks like for a particular service.
Okay, so SLOs help the SRE teams to set really clear expectations for system performance and make sure that everything's running smoothly.
Precisely. And by constantly monitoring these SLOs, SRE teams can quickly identify and address any issues that crop up before they start impacting users. And they'll also use a bunch of other tools and techniques like automated testing, monitoring dashboards, and incident management systems to keep those systems healthy and responsive.
Okay, so we've covered DevOps, which really streamlines development and deployment, and SRE, which focuses on making sure things are reliable. So where does platform engineering fit into all of this?
Platform engineering is all about creating a really smooth and efficient experience for developers. It's about giving them the tools and resources they need to build and deploy software easily. Imagine a world where developers don't have to worry about setting up infrastructure or configuring those complex deployment pipelines or navigating a bunch of bureaucratic red tape.
It sounds too good to be true.
It's the vision behind platform engineering.
Okay, so how do platform engineering teams actually achieve this? What does their work actually look like?
So they build and maintain what's called an internal developer platform, or IDP. This is essentially a self-service platform that provides developers with pre-approved tools, templates, services, and it just streamlines the whole development workflow.
Got it. So instead of developers having to figure everything out from scratch, they have this one-stop shop where they can get what they need really quickly and easily.
Exactly. It's like giving those developers a fully equipped workshop where they have all the tools and materials they need to create their masterpieces. They don't have to build the workshop itself. They can just focus on the craft.
That sounds amazing. That sounds incredibly beneficial for developers. But how do DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering all work together? Are they completely separate things, or is there some overlap?
It's a great question, and that's where things get really interesting. So they are distinct disciplines, but they're very complementary, and they work best when they're integrated.
Okay. Can you give me an example of how that might actually work?
Absolutely. Let's say you're building an IDP, right, as part of your platform engineering effort. Well, you could incorporate SRE principles right from the start to make sure that the platform itself is reliable and resilient.
So you're not just building a platform, you're building a platform that's super reliable from the get-go.
Exactly. And that might include things like putting in robust monitoring and alerting systems, automated recovery mechanisms, and of course, sticking to those all-important SLOs.
That makes sense. And that's just one example, right?
Right. You can also leverage those DevOps principles within the IDP to create nice, smooth, and automated workflows for actually managing the platform itself. It's all about finding that balance, those integration points, to create an ecosystem that's really efficient and developer-friendly.
Okay. So it's not about choosing one approach over the others. It's about understanding how they can work together to create this really holistic and effective system.
Precisely. And that's one of the most exciting things about the software development world these days. There's a lot of room for creativity and innovation in figuring out the right mix of approaches to meet the unique needs of your organization.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've looked at the evolution of software development, the rise of DevOps, how important SRE is for making sure things actually work, and the rise of platform engineering to really empower developers.
Yeah, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to unpack when it comes to software development and how these disciplines are shaping the future of technology.
Absolutely. But before we jump into those details, let's take a minute to think about what we've learned so far. For our listeners out there, what are some key takeaways you'd want to highlight from this first part of our exploration?
I think the biggest takeaway is that building software is a complex process that involves a lot more than just writing code. It's about understanding the entire life cycle, from the initial planning and design to deployment and maintenance, and recognizing how important collaboration, communication, and automation are to make the whole thing work.
That's a great point. And as we move into the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore how these concepts translate into real-world benefits for developers and how they ultimately impact the quality and reliability of the software we use every single day. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up our conversation about software development and really focusing on how these approaches, DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering, how they directly impact the people at the heart of it all, the developers.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the technical details, but the human element is so crucial. A positive developer experience is paramount to building great software.
So let's start with DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
How does this approach actually contribute to a happy and productive developer?
Well, DevOps removes a lot of the friction and frustration that developers used to face in those old siloed environments. Remember that relay race analogy?
Yeah.
Imagine finishing your part of the race, but then the baton just sits there for weeks before the next runner's ready.
Oh, yeah. It'd be so demoralizing.
Totally. With DevOps, those walls come crumbling down. Developers can work more closely with other teams, and those continuous feedback loops, they help catch issues early on, which prevents them from snowballing into these huge problems later down the line.
So it's not just about speed. It's about creating a more supportive and collaborative environment where developers can actually thrive.
Exactly. And when developers feel empowered and valued, they're much more likely to produce high-quality work.
Yep.
And CI/CD pipelines, which we talked about before, they play a big part in that.
Right. By automating all those repetitive tasks, CI/CD frees up developers to actually focus on, well, the creative problem-solving parts of their work, which is great. But what about those dreaded on-call rotations? I've heard some real horror stories about developers basically being tethered to their phones 24/7, constantly worried about something breaking.
Yeah, no one wants that. That's where SRE comes in to make a huge difference. It's all about minimizing those late-night fire drills by focusing on things like proactive monitoring, automation, and building systems that are really resilient.
Okay, so instead of constantly putting out fires, developers can actually sleep soundly, knowing that SRE has their back.
Well, hopefully they can sleep a little easier. The goal is to shift from that reactive mode, always putting out fires, to a more proactive and preventative approach, which ultimately leads to a much better work-life balance and reduces burnout.
That's a win for everyone. Okay, so DevOps fosters collaboration, gives you that faster feedback, and SRE helps reduce all that on-call stress. What about platform engineering? How does that contribute to a positive developer experience?
So platform engineering is all about creating this smooth, paved road for developers. Remember the fully equipped workfop analogy?
Yeah.
That's what an IDP, an internal developable platform, really tries to provide.
Okay, so developers have this self-service access to everything they need, infrastructure, deployment pipelines, all without having to wait for approvals.
Exactly. It's about empowerment and efficiency. Instead of spending all their time configuring environments or figuring out complex deployments, they can just focus on what they love doing, writing code.
And that can have a real ripple effect on their well-being and job satisfaction. But let's be honest, investing in developer experience isn't just about making developers happy, right? There's a real business impact here.
Absolutely. Happy developers lead to better products, faster delivery, and ultimately a much more successful business.
So how does a positive developer experience actually translate into, tangible business benefits?
Well, when developers are bogged down with all these operational tasks, it really slows down the whole development process. But when you can remove those roadblocks, teams can move faster, iterate more quickly, and get new features and products to market way ahead of the competition.
So it's a real competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just speed, too. When developers have the tools and support they need, they're much more likely to write high-quality, well-tested code, which means fewer bugs and more reliable software.
And that translates into happier customers. Nobody enjoys dealing with buggy software.
Exactly. Happy customers are loyal customers, which means increased revenue and a stronger brand reputation.
So investing in developer experience isn't just some feel-good thing. It's a smart business decision that really pays off.
Okay.
Now, I know we've been talking about these approaches, DevOps, SRE, platform engineering, as these separate concepts. But in reality, the lines can be a little blurry, right?
Yeah, for sure. In practice, these disciplines often blend together. You'll have teams adopting elements from each approach to create a solution that works best for their specific organization.
So it's not about rigidly following a set of rules. It's about understanding the principles and adapting them to your needs.
Precisely. And that's where the real skill comes in, knowing how to select the right tools and practices from each discipline to create a system that's really cohesive and effective.
So for companies that are just starting out on this journey, they're trying to improve their software development processes, where do you recommend they begin?
I always say start with a cultural shift. Embrace the core values of DevOps, collaboration, communication, and continuous improvement. You got to break down those silos, encourage cross-functional teamwork, and foster a culture of shared responsibility.
Okay. So it's not about tools and technologies. It's about people and processes.
Exactly. The tools and tech are important, of course, but they're only effective when you have the right culture in place to support them.
That makes sense. So once you've built that foundation, that collaboration and shared responsibility, then you can start layering in other practices like SRE principles for reliability and platform engineering for that streamlined developer experience.
That's a great way to approach it. It's a journey, not a destination. You don't have to do everything at once. Start small, experiment, learn, and iterate.
So find what works best for your organization and keep improving along the way.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. The key is to be adaptable, to embrace change, and to never stop learning.
That's great advice for anyone in the tech world, really. But before we wrap up this second part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a bit of a challenge. We've talked a lot about the technical aspects and the business benefits, but what about the human cost? Are we creating a work environment for developers that's sustainable and fulfilling?
That's a fantastic question, and one that I think about a lot. We spend so much time optimizing for efficiency and productivity, but we often forget about the well-being and job satisfaction of the people who are actually building these systems.
Exactly. It's something that's easily overlooked in pursuit of progress.
And it's a complex issue with no easy answers, but I think it's a conversation we need to be having.
I agree. And it's something I'm hoping we can explore in more depth in the final part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of software development, and I'm really excited about this last part of our conversation.
Yeah, me too. We've, covered a lot of ground from the evolution of software development to the impact of all these approaches like DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering. But I think it's time to address the elephant in the room, the human side of all of this.
Exactly. We can talk about tools and processes all day long, but it's the people who are actually building and maintaining these systems. And let's be honest, the tech industry has a bit of a reputation for burnout, long hours, and this constant pressure to innovate.
It's true. And it's not sustainable in the long run, We need to find a way to balance that need for speed and innovation with the well-being and fulfillment of the people actually doing the work.
Absolutely. So how do we create a work environment for developers that's more sustainable, more fulfilling? Is it even possible in such a demanding industry?
I think it is. And I think these approaches we've been talking about, DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering, they can actually play a key role in creating a more humane and sustainable tech culture.
Really? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, let's start with DevOps. One of the core principles is breaking down silos and fostering a culture of collaboration and shared responsibility. When those development and operations teams work closely together, it builds camaraderie and a shared purpose.
Right. It's like being part of a team, not just a cog in a machine.
Exactly. When people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, when they have a voice and a sense of ownership, it leads to greater job satisfaction, a stronger sense of community.
Yeah, and that can make a huge difference in preventing burnout and just creating a more positive environment overall.
For sure. And it's not just about collaboration either. DevOps also emphasizes that continuous feedback and improvement, which means developers are always learning and growing, and that can be really motivating and rewarding.
It's like having a built-in growth mindset. You're always encouraged to experiment, you learn from your mistakes, and you just keep getting better.
Right, and that kind of environment can be really empowering and fulfilling for developers.
Okay, so DevOps is all about collaboration, continuous improvement, and creating that sense of shared purpose. What about SRE? How does that contribute to a more sustainable work environment?
Well, SRE focuses on building those really resilient systems that can handle unexpected events. And when systems are more reliable, it means fewer of those fire drills, fewer late-night emergencies, less stress for everyone.
Yeah, no more waking up in a cold sweat wondering if the servers are melting down.
Exactly. And it's not just about reducing stress. SRE also emphasizes automation and proactive monitoring, so developers can spend less time on those tedious manual tasks and more time on creative and challenging work that they enjoy.
So it's about freeing developers to do work that brings them joy and fulfillment.
Exactly. And when developers are happier, less stressed, they're more engaged and productive.
Makes sense. So we've got DevOps fostering collaboration, SRE taking care of those operational burdens. What about platform engineering? How does that contribute to a more sustainable and fulfilling work experience?
Platform engineering really is all about empowerment. It's giving developers the tools and resources they need to be successful without having to go through all that unnecessary complexity or bureaucratic hurdles.
We talked about this before, right? Like creating that self-service platform where developers can find everything they need in one place.
Exactly. And when developers have that autonomy, that level of control, it can lead to greater job satisfaction and a much stronger sense of ownership over their work.
It's like you're giving them the keys to the kingdom and trusting them to build amazing software.
That's it. And that trust and empowerment can be incredibly motivating and inspiring.
So it sounds like DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering aren't just about, improving efficiency and productivity.
Yeah.
They're also about creating a more human-centered and sustainable work environment for developers.
I truly believe that. It's not just about building better software. It's about building a better industry, one that values the well-being and the fulfillment of the people who are making it all happen.
And that's a mission I can definitely get behind. But let's be realistic here. Changing the culture of an entire industry, that's a massive undertaking. It's not going to happen overnight.
Definitely not. It's a long process, requires a real shift in mindset, but I think it's a change worth fighting for.
I agree. And I think it starts with just recognizing that developers aren't just resources. They're people with their own needs, aspirations, dreams. And when we create a work environment that supports those needs and aspirations, everyone benefits.
Absolutely. It's a win-win for developers, for businesses, for the tech industry as a whole.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into software development, I want to leave our listeners with a call to action. Let's all commit to creating a more humane and sustainable tech culture, one that values collaboration, continuous learning, and most importantly, the well-being of the people building the future.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Let's make tech a place where everyone can thrive.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of software development. Until next time.